The story begins with our protagonist begging the old man not to die, before turning his gaze towards Lunan. The person they were arguing with is our protagonist, who, upon seeing the girl, introduces himself as her fiancé. These words leave the girl. Himself will not leave and will definitely come and give that money. Words that were apparently heard, since someone ends up knocking on the door in order to inform Miss Yuki that there is a gentleman outside claiming to be from the Cho family and wishes to visit her. Upon hearing that he's from the Cho family, the girl is impressed. She's impressed and excitedly wonders if it could be him. However, she doesn't finish her thought and quickly gets up from her seat to go and open the door. Since her parents were also curious, they mention they'll go and take a look as well. Once outside, this man introduces himself to the girl, stating that he is Mr. Wang, and he is there to discuss a $300 million order. The girl's parents are left speechless upon hearing this, and they wonder if the $300 million is truly on the table. Furthermore, they realize that Mr. Wang is the commercial representative of the CH family, one of the 4 main families, kindly invites Mr. AP to come inside based on this, which he ultimately accepts, but clarifies that Mr. Chov has instructed that only Miss Yu can sign the order. Hearing this, the girl becomes excited because she realizes that all of this was done by our protagonist, who, as he promised, brought the money and didn't run from the situation. After all the papers have been signed, Mr. Wan tells the girl that now that she has signed the 300 million order, he will leave, but someone will contact her later. Her father, seeing that the girl doesn't understand what's happening, explains that her grandfather, when arranging the marriage for her, specifically warned about it before he died, and he swore to agree to it, to proceed with it. Moments later, the girl accompanies the man to the exit, thanking him for coming as she does so. And the man, he's really nice and tells her not to worry because it's a small matter and there's no problem. However, after the gentleman leaves, someone behind him asks the girl if she has received the 300 million, and that someone is our protagonist. The girl, realizing it's the protagonist, quickly hugs him to thank him for doing what he promised, but, grabbing his arm, she tells him that they have to go inside. Once inside, the protagonist informs the girl's parents that he did what he promised, and therefore wants to take Yoruo Jin with him. However, things aren't as easy as they seem, since the girl's mother tells the protagonist that it must have been Chan's daughter who did all that, not him, and taking advantage of the situation, she tells him. To the protagonist, he won't hand over his daughter until he gets another order for $300 million. Words that upset the protagonist, who tells the madam not to be abusive, as his patience has a limit. Ru Yin, hearing these words from her mother with tears in her eyes, asks what she is talking about, questioning if she will break her word, but she, not caring about breaking her word, approaches her husband to tell him to look at how his daughter is talking to him. Seeing this, the girl is truly shocked and disappointed in her parents, and she goes to them and asks them. However, his wife is the one who disagrees, asking how a poor, jobless loser could be worthy of her daughter, if they think she is just a commodity to be exchanged through blackmail. And well, seeing this side of her parents that she didn't know existed, the girl, he grabs the pilot by the arm, telling him they need to leave because this kind of place can't be their home. Once outside, Lin Jin tells the girl not to be angry, to get angry, because after all, they are her parents, and while they might not be in their right mind for a while, they will be fine once they calm down. However, the girl, somewhat ignoring what the pilot is saying, timidly tells him that both her bank card and credit card have been frozen, and, besides, she has nowhere else to go, asking if he can take her home, to which the Infernal responds by saying that his father has a small courtyard in the middle of the city, and there's an empty house there. Even though it's in mediocre condition, it's habitable, something the excited girl thanks him for in the morning. Next, we move to Yanjing University, specifically the Academic Affairs Building, where our protagonist, Yasi, approaches some students who are engaged in work and study. As the protagonist gets closer, he greets them and tells them that he's looking for the vice president, inquiring about which office she's in. In response, they ask the protagonist if he has an appointment, to which he replies that he doesn't, but that he's a friend of hers. However, the student doesn't believe the protagonist at all, thinking he's making it up, and therefore warns him that he will call school security if he doesn't leave. The protagonist, and, well, according to her, the only one worthy of her daughter is Sun Kemen, since the annoyed by the treatment he's receiving, asks the student if he's implying that he's some kind of thug. But before the student answering, someone ends up appearing, and that someone is one of the protagonist's fiancés, the vice president of J University, whose name is Laon Rose, the same girl the protagonist was searching for, who beautifully asks what is happening. It should be noted that the protagonist's fiancé is not bad looking at all, and it's not just my opinion, but also our protagonist's, who blushes at her beauty upon seeing her. But snapping back to reality, smiling, he hands her his ID, and upon seeing the ID, the girl realizes that it's Linon, her fiancé, which surprises her, since her grandfather wasn't joking with her when he told her she had a fiancé. But putting those thoughts aside, the girl mischievously tells the protagonist that, so he's there to marry her. The protagonist responds by saying, of course not, since it would be absurd to get married right away, but yes, he doesn't object to them starting out as friends. All the while, he's thinking that this girl is the gentle lady he likes, and therefore, excited, he says there will be no refund, since that marriage will not be refunded. However, he's instantly snapped out of his thoughts by this man, who he then asks for his identity. This same man also tells him that he is not worthy of the young lady and, well, he clearly shows a very bitter attitude towards the protagonist, but not. Sun family is one of the 4 major families in Yam City, but I'm saying that this isn't going to be possible, since the girl previously told us, with the girl, since, approaching with a smile, he says good morning, and of course, the girl also returns his greeting, but when she sees the man's car, she is parked almost at the entrance. He instructs her to park her car in the parking space. Mr. Sun, hearing this, tells him not to worry, because he has made a reservation at a newly opened restaurant and is planning to go with her, asking if she would like to try it. However, the girl declines the invitation, since she has a meeting with the Ministry of Education and is worried she won't be able to attend. After this, she turns her gaze towards the protagonist and asks him to accompany her to her office, as they will discuss the matter in detail. However, because the girl mentioned the protagonist's name, he ends up recognizing him, wondering if Lin Feng might be his brother's enemy, and if he himself actually came to connect with the ORR. But the protagonist denies this notion, which is very different from Sun Kiming's casual gaming nature, and therefore he must marry the horror in order to secure connections with them. The government is in the hands of the Lan family, which is one of the 4 main families of Yanqin, and since their objective must be fulfilled at any cost. He says that if the protagonist dares to get in his way, he will see what he is capable of doing. While in Miss Leor's office, she asks the protagonist if he has gone to see his grandfather, to which he replies that he has not gone yet. Upon hearing this, the girl tells the protagonist that it's better this way, since that she had broken off her relationship with him. Lin Fen, seeing that they are jumping to incorrect conclusions, tells the girl's parents that he believes they have. It just so happens that this matter is between the 2 of them, and she doesn't want a third person to intervene. Becoming serious, she confesses to the protagonist at that moment. She wants to marry him. Lin Fen, hearing this, smiles and tells her that it's okay, as he would never force her, much less pressure her, and suggests they start as friends. He does so while handing her his phone so they can exchange numbers. He tells her it's okay, all the while thinking to himself how surprised he is by how easy this is. Talk to the protagonist, wondering if he really won't use the marriage contract to force her into anything. After this, hours pass, and at noon that day, after they had settled everything, the protagonist tells the girl that he doesn't have much money, asking her if he can buy her some ramen, to which the girl agrees, telling him that she is glad that he is willing to treat her to a meal, while making one thing clear, and that is not demanding this while thinking the protagonist is too stingy, and she probably says this because she thinks he doesn't want to spend money on her. But in reality, we know the protagonist doesn't have a single cent, and as they're sitting down, the protagonist asks the man working there to give him 2 bowls, large bowls of beef noodles. But upon hearing this, the girl tells the protagonist that she'll just have a small one. However, as she gains a little confidence, the girl asks the protagonist about his current job, to which he responds by saying that he was in the army for a long time, but he was recently discharged. Misunderstood, as he's not there to get married, but to break off the marriage, which greatly upsets the lady, who asks him, "What do you mean, break off the discharged?" So he doesn't have a job and not much money, which surprises the girl, who, upon hearing this, wanted to ask the protagonist something, but without. She is stopped by a person who dared to shout in the place, which causes everyone to turn around and wonder what's going on. Turning around, they realize that the person who screamed was this bald kid, who, seeing that the fruit tree was looking at him, asks why he's staring. He asks if he wants to lose his eyes and, acting arrogantly, demands that he kneel and bow 3 times, or else he'll tear off his arm or leg. Faced with this, the protagonist tells him to calm down, as he doesn't want to leave a bad impression on his friends, referring to the girl. However, seeing that the protagonist is in trouble, she wonders to herself what Lin Feng is going to do. However, when the protagonist spoke directly to him, he rushes towards the protagonist, but before he can do anything, the protagonist tells him to wait a moment. He then turns his gaze towards a rich man who is standing there. He tells her that he is currently unemployed, but he is a doctor, so if she marries him, he will be able to support her. These words supposedly impress her, and he asks the protagonist if he is a doctor, specifically a military doctor, while wondering what the point of bringing that up now is. The protagonist, meanwhile, grabbing the bald guy by the shoulder, he confirms what the girl said, stating that he is indeed a military doctor and, based on that, tells him that he is very good at building marriage. How can he offer to cancel their marriage? She asks the protagonist, questioning if he isn't thinking about her daughter. Words that make the protagonist human skeletons, and with that, he warns the bald guy to be careful. Then, with a swift movement, he throws the bald guy's arm and breaks it instantly, something that makes him scream out in pain. The bald men, witnessing this, exclaim that it's unbelievable, as they didn't even see when the protagonist broke his arm, and, well, thanks to this, everyone ends up abandoning their boss. However, another person who commented on how incredible it was is the girl, who was impressed by what the protagonist did, explaining that the bones and joints of young adults are very strong and sturdy. She then asks how they can dislocate with a mere touch. The protagonist, using the bald man as a demonstration, tells him to touch his arm, which the man immediately does, but in doing so, he screams in pain. But the moment the protagonist gives him a light tap on the shoulder, he goes silent. He then exclaims that it's incredible, because he doesn't. It doesn't hurt at all. The pain vanished completely, and he feels nothing. However, Linf maliciously dislocates his arm again, and naturally, because of this, the bully asks him why he dislocated his arm again, but the protagonist doesn't answer. Instead, he turns his attention to the girl and asks her if it's fun, which she confirms. The bully, seeing and feeling the way he's being treated, bows before the protagonist and apologizes because he was wrong, begging the protagonist to let him go. However, letting him go won't be that easy, since the protagonist knows very well that someone sent that guy. Confused, he asks the lady, "What the hell is wrong with you?" Since just a moment ago they were complaining because they thought he was going to marry their to harass him. And so he asks him who told him to go there, which the bully, with tears in his eyes, answers. The protagonist tells him that Mr. Sun sent him and gave him 10,000 to humiliate him in front of the girl. Upon hearing this, he says to the protagonist to forget about it and just inflict an injury, to which the protagonist, while fixing the bald man's arm, agrees. Seeing that his arm is back to normal, the bully thanks Lin Fen repeatedly while handing him money. After handing over the money, he ends up leaving the place. Seeing that he now has a lot of money, Lin Fen tells the girl that they can now go eat somewhere fancy, but the girl tells the protagonist that they've already ordered everything, so they have to finish that first, all the while thinking that the protagonist is interesting. However, by the time she finishes thinking, she ends up receiving a call from her grandfather. After answering and talking with him, she asks the protagonist if he would accompany her home after dinner to meet her grandfather, who is in the city, which the protagonist accepts without hesitation. After a while, they arrive at the girl's house, where we can see a large number of security guards protecting the residence. However, despite the numerous security guards, the protagonist remains unimpressed, passing through as if they weren't there, until he arrives where the girl's grandfather is. The girl informs her grandfather that she has returned, which makes him happy to see his granddaughter, but upon noticing that she is also daughter, but now she's saying something else entirely. The girl, whose name is Fruin, tells her parents that it's all right, and not to argue, since it's 2028 and she is in charge of her. The girl's grandfather informs her grandfather that she is back, which makes him happy to see his granddaughter, but when he realizes that she is also there is Lin Fen, he argues with his granddaughter, explaining that the protagonist belongs to the Special Department of the National Secret Army and is a member of the Atni organization. Words that impress the girl, who, now impressed, asks her grandfather if the protagonist is one of the NCK-6. He confirms this, to his granddaughter, and asks if she really thinks he would find a normal man to be her fiancé. However, upon hearing all this, the girl excitedly approaches the protagonist to ask him to tell her about Diane's #1 dead doctor, since he is her idol. However, Lin Fen can't really respond to her words, since, as we can see, she has the protagonist's arm buried in her breasts, which is quite distracting for him. The grandfather of the girl, noticing this, asks her granddaughter to pay attention to her behavior, and the granddaughter, realizing what she was doing, quickly pulls away from the protagonist, looking very blushing. Moments later, the protagonist, who was already sitting with his grandfather, asks if his father had mentioned his situation, which he ends up denying. Now, I'm not entirely sure what situation they're referring to, but the old man tells the protagonist that he has 3 children, and the eldest was the head of the 3rd Division of the Hidden Legion, and the second was the deputy chief, which impresses the protagonist when he hears it. Impressed, he asks. He himself, while looking at her with eyes filled with hatred, told her that he would never forgive her. Absolutely not, even though he had loved her. However, everything, marriage, and therefore, she will decide what happens from here on out, something he sincerely doubted, as the protagonist, turning around, tells everyone that, how the 3rd sector is doing, since according to his information, that sector was annihilated in a single operation and no one survived, a fact the grandfather confirms, but he says that, fortunately, the 3rd son dedicated himself to business and didn't get involved in those things, and that R is his only daughter and only granddaughter, and she currently works in the 1st Division of the Hidden Legion. Changing the subject slightly, he tells the protagonist that he hasn't introduced himself yet, saying, so, she is the only one, has just retired from the 1st Division of the Hidden Legion. However, upon hearing this, the protagonist tells him that it's a coincidence that Danon has disbanded and he has retired, which prompts the grandfather to tell him that he is still young. However, Lymph doesn't let him finish and tells the old man that they have done more than enough, as they have accomplished the equivalent of 100 years of work by 100 elite members of the Hidden Legion. But since the protagonist wants to discuss that particular matter. Just then, he tells the old man that now that they've met, he needs him to do a favor. However, this isn't revealed to us, the favor that the protagonist requested. Sometime later, the protagonist, who was in the process of leaving the house, encounters Ruin, who, upon seeing the protagonist, quickly informs him that her parents just called to tell her that the Ministry of Commerce has disapproved the contract for the $300 million order of dollars. They also mentioned that they might face a significant payment in damages. Yigan had said he would only speak with her, and based on that, anyway, he's already backing out of the marriage, so he'll leave after he said his goodbyes to everyone. However, before leaving, asks the protagonist what is happening, because he has asked some of the other directors if their approvals are normal, and this situation shouldn't be occurring. A product of the Cho family, as the Cho family shouldn't be powerful enough to influence the Ministry of Commerce. However, Miss Laro. He suddenly appears and, hearing this, tells the girl that everything happening to her is due to her grandfather's pressure, and that the protagonist is doing it to get revenge on her. Ruyin apparently knows the girl, because upon seeing her, he calls her by name and asks what she's doing there, inquiring if she knows Linfen, which she confirms, adding that she is the protagonist's fiancé. Seeing the girls talking normally, he asks if they know each other, which she confirms, and then complains to the protagonist, pointing out that they are engaged and yet he's with another woman, demanding that he stay away from Lan R. The protagonist asks her why she would do that, adding that he knows her situation, and besides, a gentle lady like Lanro is more his type. The girl, she's a little upset and questions the protagonist about how she's nice, pointing out that Lanro and she have been in the same class from elementary school all the way to high school, confessing that Lanro smokes and drinks too. She tells the girl all of this, who has misunderstood her, and the protagonist, who thinks almost the same thing, since he yells at the girl, telling her that it doesn't matter what happened in the past, because now Lanro's grandfather is helping her, and therefore someone ends up arriving, and that someone is Sun Kemen, Ruo Jin's supposed boyfriend. And of course, Mrs. Albero is happy because he has arrived at the shouldn't treat her that way. But before things escalate, the girl tells the protagonist to forget it, saying that it doesn't matter since he is accustomed. However, no matter how much Rin says this, she doesn't believe him at all, because she thinks he's pretending, which causes the protagonist to call him out again. Attention again, but Rin, grabbing his arm, tells him that nothing is wrong and asks him to go buy something to eat and come back later, because she needs to talk to Ru Jin alone to clear up any misunderstanding, which the protagonist thinks is a good idea, and as he leaves, he warns her and asks her to pay attention to the girl's attitude. To his attitude. Once they are alone, Rin tells Ruo Jin that what happened earlier was truly a misunderstanding. However, as she shows her the phone, she says not to pretend because she has recordings and videos, which prompts her to take off her glasses and reveal her true face, showing who she really is. And well, I say this because the girl now completely changes her attitude, calling Ruo Jin little cow and telling her that he didn't think she had the skills to become involved with the protagonist. And well, things are getting interesting. Ruo Jin, faced with this, he smiles slightly and says, "So this is your true face." Completely changing his attitude, he asks her if she genuinely likes the protagonist or she is only with him to hurt her. The girl, while looking at her with a downcast gaze, tells her that she met the protagonist just a few hours ago. So what's the point of saying? Opportune moment. He approaches the lady to ask for permission to take Ruo Jin for a walk, which the lady has no problem with, since that she likes him. Getting quite close, he tells her that he has never stopped thinking about her, which makes Ruo Jin say that she knew it, since the girl is a sadist. And then he moves his hand away from his face, telling him that he thought the protagonist was good and wanted to test him out. The reason he's telling him this so frankly and calmly is that, frankly, she is grateful to her grandfather for helping her, words that she interprets almost as a threat, as she asks him if he is perhaps telling her that the protagonist is her man and she should stay away from him, which Rin confirms. However, by confirming this, I think her curiosity about the protagonist increases, and blushing, she tells him that this is interesting, while thinking that by saying that, the little cow is only piquing her curiosity about him. After this, time passes, and 2 days later, we find ourselves in this luxurious hotel where Lin Fen was meeting with Ruo Jin. The protagonist informed the girl that Sun Kemen had asked them to talk here, as this hotel is owned by the Sun family, but because it's not entirely safe, he tells the girl to be careful, and as he hands her something, he tells her to take it. The girl, who was wearing a beautiful and elegant dress, and elegantly dressed, curious about what the protagonist gave her, asks what it is. The protagonist, smiling, responds by telling her that it's insurance. After entering the place where Sun Kemen was waiting for them, upon seeing them, he tells the protagonist and the girl to please take a seat so he can ask for the meal to be served. While giving him permission, she tells him that he has arrived at the right time. However, Sun Kemen, upon seeing the protagonist, tells the lady that he looks meal. However, Ru Jin, who had broken up with him previously, approaches him to tell him not to bother, since he's only there to. However, he doesn't tell her. He lets her finish and invites her to sit down so they can talk while they eat. The protagonist, noticing that the girl seems a little insecure, puts his hand on her shoulder and says, he tells her to sit down and not worry, adding that Mr. Sun is paying for the meal, so it definitely isn't cheap. After the food is served, Sun Kim asks them to open the wine, and once it's opened, he tells both the protagonist and the girl that everything they see there, including the wine, isn't something common people can get their hands on. The girl, even though the wine looks tempting, ends up declining it because she has to drive, so she can't drink. However, the protagonist tells Rujin that they can ask for a chauffeur to drive them, wondering how she could pass up trying such a wine. It's so good, which he affirms, because that wine is a chambard, and it's quite excellent. This is while he's thinking that it is indeed a chambard that has seen the world, implying that this guy is planning something. The protagonist, while handing the glass of wine to the girl, asks her to drink it, but the girl is still a little unsure and asks the protagonist if it's safe to drink that wine, wondering if there might be a problem. The protagonist tells her to drink and not worry, since nothing will happen, and furthermore, he reminds her that there's insurance covering her if something goes wrong, referring to the familiar, asking if he happens to be a relative of hers. This worries the lady, or rather, she's a little worried about revealing the protagonist's identity, so she tells him, pill, that the protagonist gave her earlier. They are Kemen. Hearing the girl ask the protagonist if the wine is safe, he tells her that that's just a glass of wine, nothing's going to happen. And with that said, the protagonist wastes no time starting to drink right along with the girl. And Sun Kemen, seeing that they've started, so he thinks and laughs, since his plan is going perfectly. He reveals to us that the spiced red wine will kill them in the blink of an eye, and a little. Later, we see the protagonist and the girl under the influence of the wine, and Sun Kemen, seeing this, laughs maliciously, and, while looking at the protagonist, he tells him that he is not worthy of stealing a woman from him, and besides, it's a waste of time to pour champagne on him. He does this to later inform someone on the phone to come upstairs and, as planned, he was supposed to send him and the woman to room 888, and the other man to the ban, room 788. However, the conversation is interrupted by the protagonist, who invites the boy for a drink. But this was just a minor distraction, as Lin Fen ends up pulling out a needle to quickly use it against Sun Kemen, and by using the needle, in the blink of an eye, he ends up falling asleep, and upon seeing this, The girl comments that fortunately she has insurance, and if it weren't for that insurance, they would fall into her trap. However, this is not. He didn't see when the protagonist took that pill, and therefore, based on this, he asks him how he was able to resist the stasis effect, to which the protagonist, that man is. But before she can finish her sentence, Ruin interrupts her mother to announce that the protagonist is her husband. Words that leave her, responds by telling her not to forget that he has studied Chinese medicine. With that said, Lin Fen, while taking Sun Kemen's phone, says he's going to see what he can find. Planned, but upon reviewing it, he makes this face while saying that Sun Kemen is trash, and when he sees what he himself had planned, he specifies it. And then he takes out a flask and gives it to her to drink, which worries the girl, who asks him what he gave her, to which the pra tells her that he gave her a sil de nafil. Nafil, it won't kill him, it'll just send him to heaven. However, the girl is surprised when she hears the name of the flask, since she knows very well that what the pra is giving Sun Kemen is Viagra. Everything continues, with Lin Fen asking Miss Rujin to lie on the ground so that she can pretend that she is under the influence of wine, and well, the protagonist asks the girl to do this because in the previous video, we could observe how the redhead called some people, so that they could ascend to where he was. Therefore, after the protagonist provided this substance, he settled himself on the table and said this to the girl. That being said, we can observe how other people have just arrived at the location, and of course, these people are the same ones that Sun Kemen had summoned. However, one of them is surprised to see that Sun Kemen is also sleeping. Based on this, he asks his partner why Mr. Sun has also fallen, to which he responds by telling him not to inquire about the personal affairs of their guests and to get to work instead, which he immediately does. Everyone was surprised, including the protagonist, who didn't anticipate this response from the girl, but if that surprised him, I think this will too, because the girl, immediately. Sometime later, while the protagonist was supposedly sleeping, someone in the hallway reports that Infen is still sleeping and that Mr. Sun and the others are on the next floor, where they overhear words that immediately make the protagonist open his eyes. This stops momentarily as he passes by his window, saying that he has to find Ruo Jin first. With that said, the protagonist ends up climbing down to the next window, where the young woman was. Rujin is with Sun Kemen. The protagonist knocks on the window 3 times for the girl to see him, and upon seeing him, she immediately opens the window, but asks him if he is crazy, since he could fall. However, he tells her not to worry, because he was a soldier, and both the 7th and 8th floors, as well as the 27th and 28th floors, are like child's play to him, meaning the protagonist is saying that he would have no problem going down or climbing up all those floors. However, getting to the main point, the girl, looking a bit worried, asks the protagonist what they should do now, because if they leave, the waiter will definitely would stop them. But the protagonist seems to have everything planned out already, as he grabs the girl's hand to place it on his back, telling her that won't happen, because they're going to leave the usual way, which is to go down or jump out the windows. Hearing this, she asks the protagonist if he's sure about able to do it, to which he replies that she'll see whether or not he can, words that convince the girl to go along with the protagonist's plan, and, with conviction and a clear voice, she reaffirms to everyone that she will marry Lin Fen, that is, our protagonist. Faced with this, the boy asks her what the hell. While climbing onto the protagonist's back, she tells him he better be aware of what he's doing. However, the moment he goes up, and the protagonist manages to feel the girl's enormous melons. Faced with this, he tells her that he can't see, but that they are a little big. However, the girl, not knowing what the protagonist refers to, asks what he means by a little big, questioning if he's saying that she is heavy. A little annoyed, she tells him that if that's the case, he shouldn't carry her if he thinks she's heavy. But the protagonist, while jumping from the window, tells her that's not the case, since she has just the right weight. This was to then slow her fall a little, and fall in the most epic way possible. It's not just me who thinks this was epic, but also the girl, who, completely blushing, thought to herself that the protagonist is fast and firm, and his arm strength is incredible. However, since the protagonist was already in the VOD, the first floor asks Ruyin to wait for him in the car because he has some things to take care of, which she agrees to. And, well, if you're wondering why the protagonist, he stayed on the first floor because Sun Kemen was there. Since Sun Kemen wanted to play a dirty trick on him, while carrying him, he said he would take him to his room and do to him what he wanted to do to the protagonist. And, as the protagonist himself said, he ended up taking him up to his room. And once there, he comments that He is looking forward to seeing what Sun Kemen had planned for him, and while covering his face, he says he will cover him up so he won't be recognized. And with that, the protagonist, she is talking about, since she is his girlfriend, and if she wants to marry someone, she should marry him, which makes sense since he is supposedly her boyfriend. But the mago was planning to leave the place, but before doing so, he runs into two people, specifically these two women, who are not beautiful in the slightest. The pro, perhaps, upon seeing her, he immediately approaches and asks if they are there to see Lin Fen, to which the chubby girl confirms, saying that Mr. Sun ordered it, everything. And turning to his partner, he asks if she will enter, since everything is as previously arranged. But upon hearing this, the protagonist asks them to wait a minute before entering because he has something to tell her, and what he needs to say is that Mr. Sun specifically explained that he wanted to give Lin Fen an unforgettable memory, and therefore he doesn't believe his companion is capable of it, asking why he doesn't go into battle himself. The chubby girl, before this, laughs a little and tells the protagonist that it's fine, because for Mr. Sun's sake, she, the head of the 3 golden flowers in Yi Bueno, will be. Back in the arena that day, those words were very well received by the protagonist, who happily told them that he knew they weren't ordinary people, while the other girl was thinking, or rather, wondering if she herself was too much of a burden for Lin Fen. The protagonist, she very seriously, he tells the chubby girl that Lin Fen has something on his head, so she shouldn't remove it, and that the man who caught him should be the one to open it. And well, this completely turns the tables, since what Kemen wanted to do to Lin Fen ended up happening to him, or rather, to the protagonist. This apparently was a dream of our protagonist, who, upon opening his eyes, says that he dreamed it again, and while clutching his head in worry, tells us, girl still ends up denying this, and calling him scum. She tells him that she feels like she is dirtying her mouth by uttering another word to him, and therefore, ended up doing it to him. Moments later, we see Sun Kemen, who, sensing someone's presence, wonders if it's Ruyin, which he ends up answering himself, confirming that's how it is. And grabbing the person's hand, he emphatically agrees, stating that this is definitely the way it should be, as the waiter should do what, which he told him to do. With that said, Sun Kemen dives into the action, and while doing so, he felt like he was on cloud 9, or rather, he felt as if he were riding a horse, and because the sensation was so incredibly pleasant, he wildly asked for it to continue. However, in the middle of the action, reporters suddenly arrive out of nowhere, along with the Goldita's supposed boyfriend, who claims he worked so hard to raise her, only to be deceived like this. And well, clearly, all of this is a complete farce, as Mr. Sun paid all of them to fake the entire scenario and create a plot to ruin the protagonist, but it was already too late. Sooner or later, they'll realize that the tables have turned, and the one in bed isn't the protagonist, but Sun Kemen, the so-called. The chubby girl's boyfriend is stunned when he sees her, never imagining that this would be his supposed girlfriend, and he wasn't the only one impressed, the other two were as well. The chubby girl, knowing her role very well, puts on a good act, and, while pushing him away, asks her supposed boyfriend what he thinks he's doing. She asks him to hang up the phone and not film this, all the while thinking that these are Mr. Sun's plans. And well, while the chubby girl, based on this, the protagonist takes her by the arm to leave with him, and I sincerely hope that the girl doesn't go back on her decision, was thinking this, her supposed boyfriend, with that look on his face, wondered if that was really his supposed girlfriend, commenting that it's very difficult to earn money, at least for him, since he has to pretend that the girl, who isn't beautiful at all, is his girlfriend, which is truly unfortunate. But getting back to the point, as he removed the item from his face, he told himself, clearly thinking he was the protagonist, that he was a scoundrel, and now everyone would see the true face of that wild man. However, upon removing what was covering his face, the audience was shocked to realize that it was Sun Kemen, who was as naked as the day he was born. It's also worth mentioning that he was still under the influence of whatever the protagonist had given him, and therefore, he asked the girl why she wasn't coming to continue the action, but upon realizing that the person who was half naked was the girl, with that expression, he wonders if she was really the one who was on top of him just now, and with that thought, he ends up collapsing onto the bed. Clearly, as we can see, the boy has just fainted from the shock of it all, but you can't really blame him, since this situation must be incredibly overwhelming for him. Moving on to the Sun family home, where Sun Chento, the patriarch, seeing what just happened with Sun Kemen, fears for the safety of his family, and because of this, he throws his phone down and demands that that fool be brought to him immediately. At the same time, Lin Fen was happy with what he had done, This is because, at first glance, you can see that she is very sure of what she is saying, but even though she is sure of what she is doing, her mother is not, as she questions her about what. Judging by how things are going, he wonders if the Sun family will give him money for attracting so much attention. Miss Ruin, a little worried about everything, says to the protagonist, Sun Kemen, will find out that they were the ones who did it and will take revenge with all of his strength. Furthermore, he doesn't know if it's a relief that they did it, considering all of this, since now their lives could be in danger, especially that of the protagonist, Lin Fen. Because of this, he confesses to the girl that the reason why the Sun family became one of the 4 great families was not because of money, but because of their ancient martial artists. And these ancient martial artists are physically more powerful than normal people and can kill people invisibly. Standing up very confidently, he tells the girl not to worry, as he will take care of what is worrying her, since after all, he is the director and her husband in name, so he has to protect her and her family is safe. A while later, we move to the Chi family's house, where the head of the family is asking someone if they are there on behalf of the family, and well, that someone is our protagonist, who confirms this and tells him that Ruo Jin and he have a marriage and friendship contract, even though it's a false one. Treat others in his own way. He is also responsible for the ending and, well, because of all this, the Preta tells the man so that he can help him. He himself tells him that in that case, he will do everything possible to help him, and changing the subject a little, he asks him why he doesn't take his daughter, which the Preta responds by telling him that, what the hell he is doing asking her for that, so she asks her to come back, but the girl, ignoring her mother's words, leaves the place with the protagonist. He does not want to be guilty of bigamy, and for those who do not know, bigamy is the act and state of a person who enters into a second marriage while already married. The protagonist, having seen through the old man's intentions, asks if he truly wants him to cure his daughter, now that he understands. Immediately after saying that he wouldn't live much longer, the elder, in an elated state, responds by saying that, if he can cure his daughter, he won't hesitate to give up all of the Zhou family's property. However, even though the proposal seems convenient, the protagonist, being a cool and good person, tells the old man that it is not necessary, because he cured him before he even gave him the 300 million in orders, and if he now sends someone to protect the UL family, he will cure Cho Yi-jin. That is, the protagonist is telling the old man that if he sends people right now to take care of his wife and the Yu family, he will personally heal his daughter. The old man, upon hearing this, happily agrees since it is definitely quite advantageous for him. He calls 2 of his men and informs them that they will immediately go and protect the 3 members of the Yu family. Before the 2 men depart, the protagonist tells them that they must remember that they are only to follow Ruo Jin's orders, as her parents, specifically her mother, are not trustworthy. Moments later, Mr. Chan's daughter ends up entering the room and, looking slightly worried, asks her father if something has happened to the Yu family. However, when she sees her father, which leaves her speechless, but after processing what happened, the upset boy tells the lady that she should remind her that her family's 300 million order. Laughing next to the infant, her expression subtly changes, and since she wasn't expecting the protagonist to be in their house, she tenderly asks the protagonist what is, asking a question that the protagonist doesn't answer, since upon seeing her, he immediately stops in front of her and stares at her. Then, he glanced at the girl's breasts and, without hesitation, told her to take off her clothes because he wanted to see her wound. The girl, startled by this, jumped quite a lot. Since the protagonist is acting like a pervert and standing away, she asks him what he's looking at, but her father, seeing his daughter's distrust, he approaches her and tells her to listen to the protagonist. However, the girl refuses, since her wound is on her breasts, and, therefore, she asks her father how she can show that to anyone. Also, it's important to remember that Lin Fen is Ruo Jin's husband, and if he does that, it won't be appropriate. Would have enough words to explain it to Ruo Jin, but although this is a problem for him, she believes it's also a problem for the protagonist, since she is the same as, don't worry about it. Worry, saying that as a professional doctor, his professionalism will make him see her as just a piece of pork, words that end up bothering the girl, who asks her father if the protagonist called her a pig. Her father responds by telling her not to worry about it and that he had to take the protagonist to her bedroom so he can examine her. With that said, Lin Fen tells the girl to hurry up, as her time is precious, which her father, from her family, is for the Ruo Jin family and is a dowry gift for her, and he sincerely hopes that she can manage her marriage well, otherwise they will know. Affirms. And he also tells her that, for her father's sake, if he can really be cured, then he would die without any regrets. Which makes a girl with a trembling voice tells her father not to talk nonsense, saying, so, she's going to let the protagonist see her. Moments later, we confirm that the protagonist, he took her to get examined, but during the examination, the girl was making strange noises, and also complaining because the protagonist was touching her too much. After a while, Linen finishes up with the girl and Mr. Sun. Seeing the protagonist come downstairs, he asks him how it went. The protagonist responds by saying that he will write a prescription and send it to him via chat so he can use it once in the morning and once at night, and then he will perform acupuncture, which the man appreciates. After a while, that same afternoon, Ruo Jin contacts the protagonist and asks if he hired the 2 bodyguards that were sent by the Chu family, which the butler confirms, telling him that she is, after all, his wife, Ru Jin. Hearing this, Lin Fen says that he is not in the mood for jokes, especially since the Sun family just arrived and stated that they wouldn't harm her, but would only seek revenge on him and Ba Hei. At this, the girl asks the protagonist what he is going to do now and if he already has a plan to deal with them. Lin Fen, as always, tells her not to worry, explaining that the reason they are not touching her is because they have seen the 2 bodyguards she now has, and therefore know they can't touch her. And regarding him, he tells what will happen. The lady, who is well aware of the potential consequences, tells him not to worry because they know what to do. As he was thinking, girl not to worry, since they can't hurt him yet. However, after saying this, Lin Fen hangs up the call, and immediately after he hangs up, this girl becomes. He approaches him to ask if he could lend him some money, explaining that he lost his wallet and cell phone. However, Lin Fen, knowing how this world is, he doesn't believe the story so easily, and therefore cleverly asks him to provide a relative's phone number so someone can transfer the money to him, and then he can withdraw it. Then, the girl, Alicia, tells Lin Fen that she can't do that because she's running away from home, again asking him for a favor, which is to lend him just $100. And grabbing his arm provocatively, she says that she will stay with him all night, completely at his disposal. And well, for whatever the protagonist wants, which surprisingly makes Lin Fen ask if he really intends to do that, saying that he'll have to see what that entails and will have to prove that he's not corrupt. Well, in this part, I don't understand what he's referring to, but the important thing here is that when the protagonist touches her hand, he realizes that the girl is a master, as she possesses peak dark energy at an early stage, and her control over Ki is high, and therefore, he must have practiced a powerful concealment technique, and while the girl walks away, telling him that it's no fun, the protagonist keeps thinking and deduces that this girl must be, well, she must be an assassin sent by the Sun family. However, even though the protagonist knows all this, he acts as if he knows nothing. That the Sun family has the power to ruin the O family, and they cannot afford to offend them. Moving on to Infen and the girl, we can observe that while asks her if she's a student who's in love with him, and if that's her goal, he tells her that it won't work, thus bidding her farewell. But she, seeing which direction Lin Fen was headed, the girl points out that it's a deserted road on the outskirts of town, or more accurately, a dead end. Realizing this, the girl immediately throws herself at the protagonist. However, Lin Fen swiftly dodges her attack, which surprises the girl, as the protagonist is incredibly fast. Lin Fen, already aware of the girl's intentions, tells her that she didn't come to make him fall in love, but to assassinate him, which causes the girl to take a fighting stance, telling him to stop messing around and just let her earn some money in peace. With that said, the girl lunges at the protagonist again, but her attack proves ineffective, as the protagonist easily stops her and then delivers a powerful blow. He kicked her so hard that she spat blood, and standing in front of her, he tells her that what she did is the result of being a jack of all trades, asking her if she's still an assassin, a question the girl doesn't get to answer because she quickly throws a needle at him, but the protagonist ends up stopping the needle with just 2 fingers. At this, the girl thinks to herself that she knew she should have listened to her mother and stayed at home, as she didn't expect to die on her first mission. These thoughts are interrupted by Lin Fen, who approaches to ask if she is from they were walking away. The protagonist told her that they were far enough away, so she could use it. However, as the protagonist was about to do so, he felt an aura when he touched her, Sun family, and, if so, he wants to know how many of them are there, asking where the others are. A question that, once again, the girl doesn't answer. Since he's making things difficult for her, he tells her to stop messing around, because all he wanted was to take her life. However, Lin Fen, seeing that it is becoming difficult for 80, taking out a soul, he tells her that he likes that, saying that he hopes she can endure the rest of the interrogation, to which the girl, trembling, responds that he has the ability, so he should do it quickly and painlessly. But that's no fun for the protagonist, since it won't work if he does it that way, because she can't die until she responds with information. He then dislocates her arm, raising it high. The girl, seeing that he broke her arm, calls him a bastard, but the protagonist tells her not to worry, as it's only dislocated to prevent her from attacking him while they're having fun. He then proceeds to remove the mask that she was covering her face, and in doing so, we realize that the girl is indeed beautiful. However, as the protagonist stares at her, he wonders why she seems a little familiar and distant. At this, he takes out his phone, searches for something, shows it to her, and asks if the girl in the photo is her. The girl confirms and asks the protagonist why he has her photo. The protagonist responds by calling her by her name, Dukin, and asking if she has heard of Lin Fen, words that leave the girl speechless. Surprised, she asks Lin Fen if it could really be that he is her familiar. He is a little surprised by this, as he only saw that unique meridian once when he was a child, and therefore, to dispel his doubts, he asks the fiancé, saying she thought he just had the same name, but it turns out he's the same person. However, upon hearing all this, Lin Fen laments and says that it's over, because if his father finds out that he beat up the fiancé he found for him, his father might do the same to him, and since the situation is a little tense now, he acts friendly and asks the girl if she can still stand, offering to help her. However, the girl rejects his help, asking him to leave and not touch her. She also tells him that she wants to break up with him because, according to her, the protagonist is a man of domestic violence and would rather die than marry him. Upon hearing her ask him to leave, the protagonist is happy and tells her that it sounds good to him and that she should forget about their marriage, asking her to remember to tell her family that she was the one who proposed the breakup first. That is, she was the one who proposed breaking up with him, but before she left, Lin Fen advised the girl to give up her assassination mission, but the girl didn't back down, in the presence of the protagonist, responding that it's impossible, to which Lin Fen argues that he is normally very pleasant to speak to, but he shouldn't take advantage of that ability, or he will die. But since the girl doesn't retract her statement, she tells the protagonist that he is the one who will die, and he won't be the only one. After separating from the girl, Lin Fen, while walking, encounters Miss Lan, who invites that unfortunately, he now has an even bigger headache since he has to marry one of the 10 brides his father found for him, while with the rest he has girl if someone bit her on the neck when she was a child, words that surprise her. Stopping, she asks the protagonist how he knows that. Him to get into the car since her grandfather is looking for him. Moments later, we transition to the family mansion. Upon arriving, the protagonist asks the old man, what? It so happens that he very seriously replies that they found Li Yunan's whereabouts. But this information is not enough for the protagonist, since Li Yunan is the same traitor from Dead of Night. The old man continues informing the protagonist that Li Yunan appeared in Yan'an, specifically in Guan village, or rather, in front of Wan Lin's tomb. Lin Fen, a little annoyed by this, says that if it weren't for her, the Lord, whose name is Wan Lin, wouldn't have died, and asks if she really had the nerve to visit his grave. However, that is not all the information that the old man has for the protagonist, because while showing him his phone, he tells him that she deliberately left a memory card with a video there, and upon showing him the video, Lin Fen hears the girl calling him. The boss tells him that he is sorry they can't meet face to face, because after all, he's the person who knows him best, and he won't be alive for more than 10 seconds with him, because for the first 5 seconds he will remember his past, then he will spend 2 seconds doubting her, and after that, he will think about Mr. Say before he stops, take his life. But before saying goodbye, he informs Lin Fen that he left him some things on his website, the one he's familiar with, and a password. With that said, he finishes by saying goodbye. After seeing this, the old man tells Fen that he needs him to find what the girl gave him, and the protagonist tells her that he knows because she went to his house to see a doctor when she was a child, and he was the doctor who bit her. Upon hearing this, the girl handed over, which he ends up doing immediately himself. While searching, he wonders what information she could have left him in mere seconds. Then Lin Fen finds what the girl left for him, which turns out to be another video where she details the route she took to escape after stealing the Information. First, she asks him in the video if he understands, because the Hidden Legion still has undercover agents, words that make the protagonist understand why it was so easy for her, and therefore it's not surprising that she escaped so easily. However, the video continues, and the girl tells him that she doesn't know who the undercover agents are, so she suggests that he use a voice changer. It's a good idea, as there's no harm in trying to find out. Upon hearing this, the old man asks Lin Fen why the girl beat around the bush so much to talk about an undercover agent, something he himself. She explains what's happening. She intended to eliminate all her competitors and take all the profits for herself, and the reason she's being so indirect is because the girl is aware that he's retired and wanted to force him to contact them again, compelling him to return to that life, and while gazing at the sky, he contends that he will accept the request. And last but not least, he tells the old man to inform him when he discovers his exact location, so he can personally to end his life. However, Lin Fen is interrupted by a message stating that Alan had just launched a surprise attack, but was struck. She rebukes him, reminding him that he was the one who did it, and demands to know how he dares to mention the subject, almost hitting the protagonist, but by the Chi family guards. And what he just witnessed, well, what they just showed him, is a video recorded by surveillance. Lin Fen, upon seeing who, he tries to remember what happened to him, and based on this, he asks the old man if he happens to know anything about the Sun family, since they went to provoke him, to which the old man responds by saying that the Sun family isn't worth mentioning, since with his strength he could easily wipe them out. But if he doesn't want to owe him a favor for helping him clean up, he can do it another way. Words that pique the protagonist's curiosity, prompting him to ask the old man how he could do it. The old man informs him that Sun Chento's wife is the illegitimate daughter of the second son of the Gay family, and he is a true, provincial-level tycoon. Furthermore, the Sun family is under the protection of the Wei family in Yang City, and besides, they control 40% of the training facilities in his city. Yang City is currently controlled by Yin Yin of the Ye family, J. B mentions that the Ye family and the Wei family have a long-standing feud and have been fighting openly and secretly for years. Therefore, if the protagonist wants the Sun family to disappear, he needs to use Ye Jin. After hearing all of this, the protagonist chuckles a bit and says that it's just a conflict in an anthill, and that's why he finds it so interesting. The story continues in the Narciso Club, on the 7th floor, where a beautiful girl in a red dress notices someone and asks if her security guards are still alive. Before she can, he stops her, getting very close and asking if she remembers her mother, words that transport her back to when that person was our protagonist, who replies that, of course, her guards are still alive. He simply gave them a break to go and eat, thus helping them fight for employee rights. The girl, whose name we are not yet told, thanks the protagonist for his kindness. However, since the girl doesn't recognize the protagonist, she asks who he is, to which the protagonist kindly introduces himself as Lin Fen, and says that she must be Jie Jin, the who wants to destroy the Sun family, and is there because someone suggested she seek her help. Jie Jin is a little doubtful of this, and, therefore, tells the protagonist that he wants to set his sights on the Guai family, but he will let the Liai family take the blame, saying that if the Guai family sets its sights on the Liai family, it surely won't be good for them. However, Lin Fen, noticing that the girl isn't in a cooperative mood, tells her that he will phrase it another way, and so on. With a firm and confident voice, he tells her that he is going to destroy the alias Sun family, including her, Ye Jin. Hearing this, she remarks that he says it so blatantly, asking if he isn't afraid that she is recording him and will report him to the police, something the protagonist assures her he isn't worried about. Noticing that the protagonist is serious, she wonders to herself if this boy truly isn't afraid, since it doesn't seem to be a joke, and tells herself that she has been repressed as a direct member of the family, but she has been forced to leave and make her own way. After working hard for several years, that man named she was little, crying and telling the protagonist's mother that he had intimidated and bitten her, to which his mother, in the memory, asked her not to cry. Lin Feng can't ruin her hard work, but she is aware that if she doesn't agree, she could die immediately, and after considering this, he asks the protagonist if he minds him taking a photo, to which the protagonist, while adjusting his pose, tells him to feel free to stare for 10 minutes, which should be sufficient. With that said, Jie Jin ends up taking Lin Fen's photo, and after taking it, sends it to someone, telling them that he is looking for him, searching for him, and immediately transfers 50,000 yen. However, the mysterious person replies that the identity of that person is highly encrypted, and no information can be extracted. Seeing this, the girl knows that people with highly encrypted identities have extremely powerful backgrounds and work for the state, which makes cooperation both risky and rewarding, and therefore, while she scanned her QR code and told the protagonist that she was willing to cooperate with him. So upon hearing this, the protagonist tells her that she is an intelligent woman and he will definitely contact her again. As Linfen was leaving, the girl tells him that she is sending it to him. What it is, I don't know, but the protagonist tells her that it is not necessary, since she just needs to be more sincere in their future cooperation, which leaves the girl speechless. Moving on to the family, we are shown how the blonde-haired man was asking Duke and Yu what they should do now. Duke and Yu, a little upset, tells him that it is all his fault for saying that he wanted to capture him, apologizing for the protagonist's behavior. Remembering this, Ru Jin tells Lin Fen that, from what she recalls, she has the impression that his mother was a very kind woman, and alive, and torture him with his own hands, because if it had not been for that, they would have killed him directly, and would have completed the mission a long time ago without of long. However, as soon as he finishes speaking, he hears a strange sound coming from outside and asks who it is, but no one answers him. He responded, and when the girl goes outside to investigate, she ends up falling into the protagonist's arms. Surprised by this, the girl realizes that it was the protagonist who made the noise on purpose just to catch her, which he confirms to her, since he has to deal with her, and therefore, a moment. Afterward, the protagonist takes the girl to Ruo Jin's house, and while they are there, he asks Kinju to take out her phone and call home, but the girl refuses, since she wasn't going to call anyone. This prompts El Infierno to subdue her and tell her that if she won't call, then he will do it for her. And so, after the Prota picks up the phone herself, and he tells her it's not a bad thing, since she smells a bit like a murderer and also knows how to use a special phone. Calling home, the protagonist asks his father if he knows Duken Yu, because she was on a mission to take his life, but he caught her in time. His father, given this situation, he asks her to call her family immediately and ask them to come pick her up, also telling her that she should only cook rice with her until she gives birth to a child. However, before his father can say more, the protagonist hangs up on him, telling himself that it's better to hang up before he finishes. Beautiful thing that makes the protagonist, upon hearing this, become curious and bombard the girl with many questions, in which he asked her if the 3 words. But looking at the girl, he says, "That's a good idea," referring to what his father said. The girl, at this, yells that she doesn't know. Dare not, because if you do and your mother finds out, she'll kill you. If you go through with that, he definitely won't let you go. However, at that moment, Ruin appears, who, upon hearing all of this, asks what he means by saying it's a good idea, and also asks who won't let him go, adding that she just saw the surveillance monitor. Surveillance and realized that the protagonist brought a strange woman with him, and then asks who that girl is. Linfen answers her question, telling her that the girl is the one who tried to assassinate him the other day, and that he brought her here to resolve the issue. Something Ruin is a little doubtful about, since she appears to be just a little girl. However, in a quick movement, Duken Yu ends up taking something out from under his cap, and then, using that something, while takes Ruojin hostage and threatens the protagonist, warning that if he dares to make a move, he won't hesitate to end her life. Linfen, in response, simply stretches and tells Ruojin that he's warning her because she is an assassin, and being as close as she is, if she intends to move, she will surely die. These words were the key to the distraction, allowing one of the guards to finally grab Duken Yu. In response, the protagonist quickly subdues her with the help of the other guard. Duken Yu, at this, a little scared, laughs, and tells the protagonist to stop joking around, saying that she will no longer try to take his life, and also that she will make the phone call. She remembers anything else, since her mother disappeared on the same day she did, asking if she saw anything, like if someone took her away, or where she went which alerts Ruo Jin, who immediately asks who she is going to call. Duken Yu, to avoid any confusion, introduces herself to Ruo Jin and tells her. She introduces herself as Duken Yu, the protagonist's fiancé, a revelation that slightly irritates her, prompting her to ask Lin Fen if it's true. In reality, she is his fiancé, a fact the protagonist confirms, but he clarifies that he has already refused the marriage. Nevertheless, the girl, while calling her mother, she muttered to herself that this had to be the only way for her to escape from there. With that, when Duken Yu gets in touch with her mother asks, daughter if she still remembers what to call her, essentially asking if she's having any issues. A question that is intercepted by the protagonist, who, taking the phone, informs her that he is, in fact, in trouble, introducing himself as Lin Fen. Du Kenyu's mother recognizes the name and, consequently, questions the protagonist confirms to her that he is indeed Fen Chen's son, telling her that Du Kenyu undertook the mission to assassinate him, and although he suspected it, he let her go once before. But she still dared to come, and for that reason, she wants to ask him to come and pick her up, telling him to do so lest he accidentally kill her, and because, out of respect for her, he will let her go this time. But if she continues to persist, he will not hesitate to assassinate her. With that said, he ends the call to then hand the phone to Du Kenyu and tell her that she is free to go now, which the girl does. And as she leaves, she looks at Lin Fen and says that he is last time he saw her. This makes the girl, seeing herself confronted with so many questions, respond by telling him that if he wants to know, she has a ferocious beast, and she truly feels that he really could kill her. After thinking this, she simply leaves her contact information, contact and leave the place. However, after Du Kenyu leaves, the protagonist checks his phone and notices a message from an unknown number, secret number, informing him that the Sun family will be in the city tomorrow for Guanan's 80th birthday. Upon receiving this message, the protagonist laughs to himself and says that this is perfect, as tomorrow will be an opportune day for the Sun family to make an appearance. As for Ruo Jin, he prefers not to involve her deeply, since, after all, he intends to take someone's life, so it's better she remains unaware of the specifics. The following day, at the Gu family mansion, individuals arrive, such as Lin Fen and Ruo Jin, who are there to attend Gu Chan Kin's birthday celebration. However, as they present their invitation, a familiar voice rings out. Addressing them, he declares that the Gun family mansion isn't someplace any Tom, Dick, or Harry can waltz into, and the one who said this was Sun Kemen, who was accompanied by his father and his other brother. However, Lin Fen, flashing his invitation, asks if he has something wrong with his eyes, asking if he can't see the Yu family's invitation card, reminding him not to forget that the Yu family made it possible, and he, as Ruo Jin's husband, signed a 300 million order with Cho Tian, so he's more than qualified to come in and join the fun. Upon hearing this, the red-haired man conditioned for him, and that condition is that he marry her, and they go get the marriage certificate. Sometime later, we find out that the girl convinced the protagonist already. Upon hearing this, he laughs and questions what good his qualifications are, since he's worried they might get lost on the way, causing the protagonist to glare at him coldly. Tell yourself you won't get lost along the way, but the path of their lives ends today. Moments later, we see Guanan, the head of the family. He thanked everyone for attending his birthday party. In response, those present congratulated the old man, wishing him good fortune. Family, even the Sun family extended their best wishes to the elder Agya, hoping he would live longer. Seeing that everyone present was congratulating, the old man, Lin Fen, asks Ru Yin if she isn't going to wish him a happy birthday. The girl, while holding a glass, responds that even though she has an invitation, she isn't qualified to congratulate him on his birthday, and besides, she only uses these parties to meet and talk to other heads of families about cooperation and where the business is headed in the future. However, their conversation is interrupted by a girl who, upon seeing the protagonist, remarks that he looks familiar to her and asks if he wasn't the one who beat up her guards. Well, her security guards the other day. The protagonist, feeling a little annoyed, he turns to her and asks who she is, telling her she must have mistaken him for someone else. However, the girl, not wanting to hear his excuses, without thinking twice, ends up throwing her drink at him. And, well, as we could see, this girl is Jin. Given this, I'm guessing they're just pretending, but if, to go and break off the engagements one by one, which is really stressful. But oh well, the protagonist is quite lucky, because having 10 fiancés is a good thing. As they were walking, he told her that he has given her what she wants, and it is time for her to tell him what he wants. The girl, faced with this, asked him for a moment. Since that's the case, the girl doesn't know it, and that's why she asks him why he did it. The protagonist, wanting to prevent Ruji from getting into an argument, tells her it's all right, and that she must continue with his affairs, since he will be leaving first, and to this, Jin responds that he will accompany him as well. The Sun family, upon hearing this, smiles contentedly as they see distracted people. With that, the redhead's father says that it's all right, offering a toast to everyone. Another person who was happy was the redhead, who said that Infen dared to provoke a ruthless person like Jin, declaring that the protagonist is done for. However, while the redhead was thinking this, he was being observed by Mr. Show, who commented that the countdown to the Sun family's demise has begun. Moments later, we are shown several cars, and in one of those cars were the protagonist and the girl, who tells him that she was suddenly attacked by someone a moment ago, and then he disappeared. And by doing so, the Sun family naturally had their attention drawn to him, leading them to believe that he had made a calculated move, which the protagonist continues, commenting that to vent their anger personally, they will send someone to search for her, and the money they give him will be the reward for helping. However, Jae-jin's driver informs him that his companion at the end of the line reported being followed by a car, which leads the protagonist to deduce that it must be Ruo-jin. Based on this, he asks why she followed him, questioning if he hadn't told her to continue with her. First, she needs to put an end to the bad things she's involved in, and with that said, she takes a photo to send to her boyfriend, so he can see how well he's married. Affairs at the party. Jae-jin answers, explaining that it's because the girl naturally holds him in her heart and is concerned about him, her safety. Hearing this, the protagonist sighs, saying it means he has to keep up the act to deceive her, which is definitely a problem. However, Ruo-jin notices the cars stopping abruptly and wonders why, while we see someone approaching. Without a word, this person breaks the car window and pulls her out, confirming that they were indeed trying to kidnap the girl. Faced with this, the girl threatens to call the police, but before she can, they knock her unconscious. When she wakes up, she realizes she's been kidnapped. The protagonist is next to her, and upon seeing her awake, he calls her foolish and asks if she didn't hear what he told her, to not follow her because he fears Ruo-jin won't be able to handle this kind of assassination plot, and he'll have to put on a performance for her sake. Now, the same boy who kidnapped Ruo-jin enters the place and tells the protagonist to leave, which the girl tries to prevent, but the protagonist tells her not to worry, because he will return safe and sound that very night. At the Narciso Club, the head of the Sun family was telling Miss Ye-jin that she is too greedy, and with a touch of arrogance, tells her that he only wants 2 people and is asking for 800 million, and that is. After sending the message, the girl thanks the protagonist and tells him that she will now tell him everything she knows. However, before she can do so, she herself. That's why he says she's greedy. Faced with this, Ye-jin defends herself and tells Mr. Sun that he doesn't need to tell her or ask her what she wants those 2 for. People saying they don't want to take the blame for anything. This slightly upsets Mr. Sun, and he asks Jae-jin what could be such a small thing, since there are many people who aren't afraid to die, and they just need to find a scapegoat. However, the girl responds by saying that if they don't agree, it's better to say goodbye to the guest, which prompts the redhead to approach his father and tell him that if he doesn't hand them both over himself, he really won't be able to overcome that obstacle. And well, since his son's happiness is important to him, Mr. Sun accepts the terms, which makes Jae-jin, upon hearing that, laugh a little and say that it will be a pleasant cooperation then. As night falls, Mr. Sun remarks that the money has already been paid to Jae-jin, but asks why. He hasn't brought anyone. The redhead tells his father not to worry, as Yin herself will definitely bring those people, and it's only a matter of time. However, this man, who is the elderly martial artist and bodyguard of the Sun family, comes to an abrupt halt when he sees someone standing in front of him. Given this, he asks who it is. However, upon looking closely, he realizes that the person seems familiar, and therefore wonders if it could perhaps be him or perhaps an imposter. The redhead, upon seeing this masked man, asks him what kind of dog dresses up as God playing, but the dog. A text message arrives, and upon seeing who it's from, she becomes quite worried and tells the protagonist that he will have to go to her house with her first. A while later, the girl, masked person doesn't answer him at all, which is very frightening to the redhead. Mr. Sun, seeing that his bodyguard is breaking out in a cold sweat, asks him what. It happens, however, he doesn't respond because the masked man had him pinned with a grappling technique, leaving the Cuar de Espada no choice but to beg for his life. And while being held by the technique, he realizes that the transformed form of dark energy is real, saying, so it really is him, the fearsome Dr. Doom, who uses his energy to make the car with the Song family inside fall into the void, empty. The red-haired man, who was crawling, cried for help. However, that help won't arrive, as Dr. Doom ignites a blast, lighter, and throws it into the car, causing it to burst into flames. And amidst the flames, the red-haired man continued to call for help, but upon realizing, he realizes that the masked person was our protagonist and asks him for help, admitting he was wrong. But this isn't going to happen, and the blonde realizes this happens, and while burning in the flames, he realizes that this number 1 is the protagonist. With that realization, his last words were that he hates him so much. Well, he hates him so much that he regrets ever insulting him. The next day, both the protagonist and the girl are thrown out into the street by the people who supposedly kidnapped him. Ruin, seeing the infant mistreated, asks him, with a trembling voice, where he has been and why he didn't come back all night. Telling him, she finally arrives at her house and, entering with some worry, asks her parents why all her cards have been frozen, to which her father, that he scared her to death, and asks to check him over. The protagonist replies that he's fine, and they only scolded and hit him a couple of times, saying that it was nothing. The girl, after hearing all of this, had a question. How did the protagonist provoke Miss Jaejin? Something he answers with a fabricated story. He tells her that, in reality, Jaejin is also his fiancée, and by rejecting their marriage, she disagreed and tied him up, surprising the girl, who didn't expect the protagonist to still have a fiancé, and therefore, so, upset, she gets in her car and drives off, leaving him behind. In response, the protagonist simply comments that this woman is really good at lying. A moment later, we see Ruo Jin's parents, who are pleased to read the news that the Sun family died in a supposed car accident. Enough, and they say that God has eyes. Given this, the girl's mother declares that her family is completely saved. This happens, while the man states that, even though it is not very kind, he thanks Jaejin, because she was summoned by the police as a supposed suspect. However, this seems strange to the bodyguards, since the driver who died was Ju Wei, the family's elderly martial artist. They wonder how he could have died in a car accident. However, at the Chi family's house, the protagonist thanked the man for sending someone to pick him up, to which the man, while showing him the photo she sent to her boyfriend, she tells him that is the reason why. Her mother then complains to the girl about this, since she is trying to drag them into, says it was nothing and just a small matter. And finally, he congratulates the protagonist for what he did, and asks him what he wants for breakfast, saying that his Cantonese chef's morning tea skills are very authentic, an invitation that the protagonist declines since he is not in a hurry to eat, and prefers to go and check on Chojin's situation first. However, before he can leave, Mr. Cho's servant informs him that the Sun family is visiting, and the person visiting is Sun Chento's wife, Wei Chanil, who is accompanied by this man in a red suit. However, upon seeing this man, Lin Fen notices that he himself has a tattoo that is familiar to him, specifically, a tattoo belonging to the Underworld 9. The protagonist tells us that the Underworld 9 is an evil organization that resides in the shadows of Lunian, and he is their undercover agent. Considering this, he wonders if the Guai family could be related to the 9 of the Underworld. With that being said, Wei Yanji approaches Lord Zhou to inquire about who in Yan City could cause Wang Wei, an elderly martial artist in the dark energy realm, to be burned alive. Upon hearing this, Lord Zhou asks Miss Wei Yanji if she is, by any chance, suspecting him. The girl denies it and tells him that she simply wanted to consult with him, asking if there is any expert who has come to Yi City recently, someone she isn't familiar with at all. But I believe her doubts faded. Bankruptcy looms, as the Ziba family's $300 million order has fallen through completely. In other words, it's a lost cause. And naturally, this is all the girl's fault for breaking up with her boyfriend. Disappeared when the protagonist, while playing dumb, tells Lord Zhou that he was going to get breakfast, and after getting some distance, he thinks to himself that since the people from the 9 hells have been dispatched, it's time to awaken the Dead Knight from its silence, and here they provide us with some information about it, the Dead Knight. And we're told that they are the Hidden Legion's strongest combat team, serving as guardians of darkness, with each of the 7 members possessing their own area of expertise, making each one a superpower capable of taking on 100 enemies. Furthermore, the top secret tasks, completed during their service period, are 100 times greater than those of other regions, informing us that top secret tasks will be completed during their service period at a rate 100 times higher than other legions, and on that day, the Dead Knight will reawaken. All this while the idiot was doing a call to number 4 to ask him to come and help. With that said, the protagonist headed to see Mr. Zhou's daughter, and upon touching the girl, he immediately tells him to come in, thinking that the person who entered is his aunt. He tells him that he should just put breakfast on the table, as he wants to sleep a little longer. To which the protagonist, upon hearing this, asks him, "How about I put it on the table now?" The girl, realizing that it is the protagonist, covers not herself quickly and asks him how he got in, to which he responds that she was the one who told him to come in. The girl, upon asking the protagonist what he, however, even though the situation is a bit complicated, the girl doesn't take back what she said, telling her mother that she saw with her own eyes how her G is doing there. He responds by telling her that, naturally, he is there to treat her illness. The girl, now reacting a bit, tells him that, then go out first since she was going to change her clothes. However, the protagonist asks her why she wants to change, saying she looks much better as she is. Convenient, something the girl initially refuses, but then accepts. Then he tells her to come closer, and upon her doing so, the protagonist approaches her and tells her that, don't close your eyes, since he first needs to explain today's treatment, explaining the lymphatic treatment to her in a simple way, and tells her that, next, his left hand will apply pressure. She doesn't fully accept it, but since it concerns her illness, she decides to agree, and so, moments later, strange sounds were heard in the room. After this, we move on to Miss Yiji, who informs the protagonist via chat that the police and the Han family are taking turns to go to her door, at which point the friendly chat pro asks if the family had already declared him, to which she replied that he is separated from them and is now alone, which is why she bet everything on him. This prompts the Preda to tell him not to worry, because she bet correctly, and also to inform him that he asked a brother to go find her and arrange a place for her to stay inside the clubhouse, also requesting that he needs the girl to calm down. Through chat, he accepts this and informs the protagonist that the man has arrived. Looking at the man, he wonders why he can't stop staring at him, saying the boyfriend was holding a foreign girl in his arms. Furthermore, she says that her boyfriend was only playing with her, and therefore she thinks that he didn't expect the man to be so handsome. Here, they reveal that this person's name is Shin Gun Jin, number 4 of the night. Dead 3 days later, the prophet appears at the scene to ask number 4 if he managed to find anything, to which the visibly affected number 4 replies that he had to see it for himself. However, here we are shown that what number 4 found was a recording of Mr. Sun's wife, talking to this man, who was telling her that Yejin is actually his daughter, and Chen Jun has stolen his chance to gain recognition. But in the recording, the girl reminds him that his son is now dead, but the man says it doesn't matter, because once they get rid of those people, well, they'll manage to have a few more children. After the recording ends, Yejin tells Lin Fen that he can now die for her at any time, and asks him whether or not he should protect her. However, while showing him the recording, the prophet tells him that those people very clearly stated that she is their daughter, asking him what exactly is going on. The girl explains, telling him that she is a child conceived by her mother out of wedlock, without mentioning that she doesn't know who her father and mother are, and considered a disgrace to the family. She has been locked away in the Heir family mansion for a long time, and because she was estranged from her family, she had no other option but to work hard on her own in Yang City. However, regrettably, this is how we will be. Trash, and not worth her time, which is why she can't marry him. Faced with this, her mother tells her that even if that's true, a $300 million order can. Ending this video, and yes, folks, I know the video is very short, but I promise to make the next one longer. But if you liked it, leave a like if you want. For the continuation, leave a like, and that's it, to keep the story from getting too long. Without further ado, bye, bro. Literally insane. A while later, we see this girl, who tells herself that she's lucky John showed her the true colors of her boyfriend, Z's son. Increased the family's value by 30%, and therefore they can't afford to mess with the Sun family. The girl, hearing this from her own mother, listening in a different way, and sadly letting tears stream down her face, she asks her mother if she is trying to sell her off, questioning her if she is still her mother. The protagonist, seeing how the situation is escalating, asks if it's just 300 million, saying, so that amount is no problem for him, since he himself will provide it. However, the lady, upon hearing that Linen will put up the money, tells him that it's 300 million, not 300, asking him what the hell he is, and, being doubtful, she asks if he intends to become a son-in-law, and well, she says this, because, literally, the protagonist married her daughter, and well, we could see that it did happen, since he had the certificate and everything. The protagonist signs again, that it's a piece of cake, and tomorrow, at the same time, there will be $300 million, which prompts the lady to tell the protagonist that, if he succeeds, then she will give him his daughter, but if he doesn't succeed, he will have to die in front of Son's eyes. With that said, the girl, while wiping away her tears, tells the protagonist to leave from there. From there, which bothers her father, who tells her that she can accompany the protagonist to say goodbye, but she cannot go with him. However, the girl once again ignores her father's words and ends up taking the protagonist with her. Once outside, the girl apparently doesn't really a scumbag who was playing two different people, which is why she had to quickly end her relationship with him. Seconds later, the girl believed the protagonist, and that is why she asks him if he is going to run away, which the protagonist denies, and then he takes her phone and exchanges number. And after exchanging numbers, he tells the girl that since he saved her number, someone will contact her. Handing her the phone, she tells her that she will definitely fulfill the promise she made to both her and her father, but she must not forget her promise to him, which is to tell him of his mother. Afterwards, after saying goodbye to the girl, Lin Fame, who happened to be in the vicinity, tells us that half of the wealthiest people of the city reside there. Well, the protagonist intends to seize this opportunity to make money, and to do so quickly, he ends up flying over a wall, landing inside a private property where a man was training. However, upon seeing him, the protagonist informs himself, which is a shame because he developed dark energy, but he also has internal injuries that are preventing him from progressing further in his cultivation. So, unfortunately, however, Lin Fen broke into private property, and this man, while questioning his identity, prepared to extract his white soul. But before he can do so, the man stops him and asks the protagonist if he can see with the naked eye that there is something wrong with his body. Words that the protagonist confirms this and tells him that, apart from being able to see it, he can also heal his internal wounds. However, the price for curing him is around 300 million, ends up arriving at her house, but upon arriving, she notices her parents arguing with someone, telling him that he only needs to. This is not received well by the man's son, and based on this, he tells his father that the protagonist is surely a liar, thus asking him to. He didn't listen to his nonsense, but the protagonist, in order to prove that he wasn't spouting nonsense, ended up gathering energy in his hand and then directing it towards the Lord's son. The Lord, seeing that the protagonist sent his son flying with his energy, is impressed, and, being impressed, realizes that the protagonist is a master. Therefore, approaching him, he tells him that $300 million is nothing to him, asking him when he is going to understand and how long it will take to heal. Line, while examining him, informs him that his wound is not easy to treat, since it will take at least half a month to heal, which is a long time for him. However, the Lord doesn't think the same way as the protagonist, as he is left speechless upon hearing that it will take half a month. This is happening while he's thinking about how he's been tormented by that internal wound for 20 years, and many famous doctors haven't been able to cure it. And the protagonist, he says he can cure it in just half a month. Literally, 20 years really is a long time. The protagonist, perhaps sensing that the man was impressed by this, approaches him to examine him, so that he doesn't think he's just talking nonsense. And therefore, while touching his back, he asks him if it hurts, which Lord confirms with great pain, commenting that the temperature is fine that day, but his secret wound hurts every time it rains, and it goes towards die. Look at himself, since he is not worthy of their daughter. And well, since the girl doesn't know what's happening, she asks what's going on. However, we are shown that he says to himself that the protagonist is really something, since he was able to pinpoint the exact spot of his dark wound just by touching it, something that made him. It seems impressive. However, Lin Feng, without saying much, throws his energy at the Lord, the impact of which sends him flying. Although it looks like the fall would hurt, the blow was going to hurt him, but let me tell you, it's quite the opposite. The old man gets up and says that the sensation is incredible, because thanks to the protagonist now, he feels the energy flowing through what was once dead flesh, and upon hearing this, the protagonist approaches him and asks if he wants him to do it again, which the old man confirms. And well, since he asked for it, the protagonist ends up doing it, but unlike the first time, the old man doesn't fall to the ground, since he remains standing with great vigor. With that said, Lin Feng, seeing that the old man is full of energy, tells him that he will give him a recipe and return shortly. This week, but for now, he has to send him the 300 million, and well, since the man has no problem with it, he accepts without any issues. After this, night falls, and we move to Ruin's house, where his father was telling him that he has a bad eye for choosing people, arguing that surely the protagonist must have fled. This was happening while his mother was also telling him that a loser like the protagonist, who doesn't even have a decent job, could afford to find 300 million. However, even though things are stacked against the protagonist, Ruin fully trusts him and says that he